Welcome to 101. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here at PAC 14, but we're not at PAC 14. We're still doing things remotely because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And today we have one of our favorite guests. A little over 5 years ago, she was the first guest on 101 when they gave me the show. And she's got something in common with a man named Groucho Marx because he was the first guest on The Tonight Show when Johnny Carson took over. So welcome to Senator Mary Beth Carozza. Welcome.
I like making history. That's a terrific introduction.
Are you excited to be compared to Groucho Marx?
So I'll tell you, whatever it takes to keep people interested.
Well, first question is, you have a very extended family. I know you're very involved in your church as a church leader with a youth group. Things are very strange right now. How are you doing and how is everybody?
Well, my primary concern would be my parents, and mom and dad are doing great. They're in their early 80s, so they have been very good about staying at home. A little stir crazy, but what we do is we rotate in shifts because we can go to the back patio and with social distancing have our visits. And with all of the grandchildren in town, and obviously they're rotating in with visits. I try to time it so it breaks it up. So they're keeping their spirits up. And actually, mom and dad have been a great inspiration for me as far as supporting my public service. The example I give is my dad's always been a hard worker and has always said, do your part. My mom has always been a rock of faith, and those traits are very much on display right now, and they are encouraging me, and they understand my top priority is supporting my constituents most impacted by COVID-19.
Well, in terms of being a politician, one of your big traits is that you get out and about. You are in contact with people all the time, and you're able to measure what they have on their minds and convert that into what you think are priorities. What's it like not being able to get to things anymore?
Well, of course, I'm going to say it's public service as opposed to politics, but it has been a little challenging because I'm always on the front lines and I take pride in moving around all three counties in all the remote areas. So now we've had to change our operations. I spend a lot of time on the phone and really trying to have substantive conversations. Whether it's our small business operators and hearing what their ideas are for a safe and healthy reopening, whether it's the many constituents who have been unfortunately frustrated by trying to go through the unemployment application process, whether it's also touching base with our educators. I've been in touch with all three of our school superintendents. So it's just having to adjust to phone time, Zoom time. Obviously, Zoom is the new way to do business, but I am very much looking forward to being out and about, social distancing. I have done just very much have limited my activities, but I did go down to Pocomoke recently because there was a celebration of Mrs. Beatrice Jones' 96th birthday, and we did a safe distancing car parade, and it was nice to have that type of uplifting event to look forward to and to participate in it.
That's terrific. That really is. Now, I saw just recently you got pulled into the discussions that the Ocean City Town Council is having in terms of reopening. And if you ever wondered what kind of a service economy exists in Ocean City, all you have got to do is go down there and see that there's nothing going on because all the restaurants are closed. It's really a ghost town. It's quite alarming, just the impact that's going on there in terms of the economy. And I know that the resort is trying to work its way out of that, and you're involved in those discussions.
Well, in numerous local recovery task force, including working with Bill Chambers with the Salisbury Chamber and his efforts, the Ocean City Recovery Task Force, those meetings tend to be about an hour and 15 minutes, really working through what the guidelines might look like for a safe and healthy reopening. I want to give credit to the small business operators. We have some of the best minds and most creative here on the shore. And they are coming forward with ideas in coordination with our health officers and with our law enforcement to figure out that as we move to phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of our reopening, that we will do so in a safe way and actually making it work. So my job right now is to make sure I'm understanding all of the flood of ideas that are coming in, to organize them in a way to make sure they're shared with Governor Hogan, Secretary Schultz, our Maryland Secretary of Commerce, Maryland Department of Labor, Tiffany Robbins, and others, and make sure that coordination is in place, and to be an advocate for what has to be both a safe but reopening in a way that we keep our residents, our visitors, and our employees and all involved safe.
And I know that people are going to be asking the government for money. So I know you have some thoughts on some kind of relief for these businesses.
So initially, right when we had the early adjournment and came home, I started working just teleworking full time on the immediate request for assistance for those most in need, most impacted by COVID-19, and actually to try to triage those. And triaging them in a matter of those who were seeking unemployment, and then those small businesses that were applying for loans and grants, and to try to help them through that payroll protection payment process. In cases where I want to also give credit to our local community banks, because they really stepped up and helped a lot of our small business operators through that process. So that was the immediate focus. Then the focus, and I would say you really saw the shift, I would say Easter Monday is when the focus became on recovery, the actual ideas of reopening, specific guidelines, and again, these different industries, whether it's hospitality, retail, the casinos, they have come up with detailed plans for what that reopening would look like, and coordinated with the local health officials. And I want to stress that point because I think it's important that the public knows that you don't have these small business operators working in a silo, that everything they're doing is being vetted by our health department officials. So then we're in a good position for me to follow up with Governor Hogan and with the administration to say, look, we believe this can work in this safe way to get this recovery going. As far as the additional assistance that'll come from the federal government and state government, I want to give priorities to the smaller small businesses and make sure that they have access to those funds. And I want to make sure our local and smaller municipalities also have access to the funds that are coming from the federal level to the state level. So those will continue to be my priorities.
I'm getting a lot of feedback from people about the the state unemployment website. I'm starting to get readers calling about that.
It's been a very frustrating process. The numbers have been unprecedented across the state, across the country. It's been particularly challenging for self-employed individuals who are eligible for unemployment assistance, but there initially wasn't a system that they could go and apply for that unemployment. So therefore, a new system was created, but with the surge on that system and the unprecedented numbers, it's had a rocky start. I have been in direct contact with Secretary of Labor Tiffany Robbins to basically say what improvements need to be made, what pressure do you need to keep on the vendors, because you can't have a process where people, first of all, are in such dire straits, and then when they go to seek the assistance and make the applications, they become even more frustrated. So that has been taking a tremendous amount of my time and my staff's time. And we understand the frustrations they're going through. We tell them we're following up for them, and we're going to work with them all the way through the process.
Take me back to the session. It must have been a really wild time there because you guys were in full mode. You were doing the most work that you do in that big 3-week stretch. And I guess it became apparent all at once or slowly that the session was going to end early and you're going to have to change how you did things. What was that like? I haven't heard anyone talk about that.
Well, there was a sense that we were leading up to an early adjournment, but we didn't know what that adjournment would look like. And then the weekend before, so we adjourned on March 18th, and the weekend before it became very clear, okay, we are going to have this wrapped up by Wednesday. I think initially it was Tuesday, but it ended up spilling over to the next day. And so that meant our one constitutional responsibility is to pass a budget. So, we had the focus on that. And then the priority became on what emergency bills needed to pass so Governor Hogan and the administration would have the resources to respond to COVID-19. And then any of the health measures. So we also prioritized the telehealth bills that passed at the very end. So we knew once the date was set for that early adjournment that, we had to do the budget, we had to do the emergency authorities and emergency money, the rainy day funds, and then we had to do the health measures, primarily the telehealth bills. So we were able to accomplish that. I think what was most disappointing for me is once we knew there was an early adjournment, why we had to continue and push forward on the Kirwan education bill when, to me, that should not have been the priority at that point, because it was clear that COVID-19 was impacting everything, especially the budget for the future. And so yet here we are trying to rush for an early adjournment, do our priority bills, which we did complete, but at the same time, still move forward with Kirwan and tax increases. And that made no sense to me whatsoever. And therefore, I did vote against the Kirwan bill and the tax increases.
Yeah, and on Kirwan, I get the sense that you support the initiatives. The question is how to pay for it.
Well, a little bit of background on that. I was a late appointee to the Kirwan Commission, but I had made the effort throughout that entire 3-year process, even when I was not a member, to, on my own dime, go up to Annapolis, attend the Kirwan Commission meetings, because I realized that they were impacting future education funding decisions as well as policy changes. And in that process, it became very clear to me that the Kirwan Commission focused on one area, primarily on the policy recommendations, and gave very short shrift to the funding formulas, which was one of their primary objectives in forming the Kirwan Commission. And so I tried to use my position both before being appointed and then as an appointee to point out, number one, to fight for fair funding formulas for the shore, and to make the case of why you also needed to give the local jurisdictions as much flexibility, given that they were moving forward with a lot of these recommendations on their own. So I wanted to give the local jurisdictions as much flexibility as possible to say, with limited budgets, they should have the authority and flexibility to focus in the priorities at the local level. And then a final issue that I was very disappointed that was not hit head on in the Kirwan Commission recommendations was the whole classroom management issue, giving teachers more authority and more flexibility in their classrooms. And in the absence of that, and then layering on COVID-19 on top of everything, I just could not see how we could go forward with the Kirwan Commission recommendations at this time.
I know you have a long history with the governor. You've been close to him for many years. But I think there's probably a management book, a leadership book to be written just based on how he's conducted himself during this pandemic. Where are you on his leadership?
Well, first of all, Governor Larry Hogan has the toughest job in the entire state of Maryland. He cares deeply about the people of this state. And when you think about what he originally ran on, job growth and economic development and, opening Maryland back up, and then to be, and we were doing so well under his leadership in those areas, and then to have COVID-19 come, where he literally, through his executive orders, has to shut down businesses, has been devastating as far as he understands the impact that this is having. But he is balancing, and I think doing a really good job balancing the health considerations. Our first job as elected officials is the health and safety of our constituents. And Governor Hogan has not only been a leader in the state, but at the national level of taking steps to protect the public from the very beginning. Right now, we're coming to a very difficult stage of this on how you balance opening up in a safe and healthy way. And he has people making recommendations from all sides. And so I want to thank Governor Hogan for his leadership and let him know and let my constituents know that I will continue to be a partner in this to make sure that as we reopen and recover, and this is going to be a long recovery, that the voice of my constituents and the priorities of my constituents will be at the forefront.
I just feel like he's developed so much credibility, at least with me. So he'll announce these initiatives and I'm like, what? We have to do that now? But then when he talks about it, I'm like, okay, I understand. I'm willing to follow this guy. He's got some sort of an ability to be persuasive because he's so sincere about this, but he's at the same time, he's taken real command of the situation.
And you think about his past challenges before COVID-19 hit. So as a new governor, just a couple months into his tenure, to have the riots in Baltimore and where he had to deal with that emergency situation. And, he literally went on site and conducted operations out there to demonstrate his leadership. And then, just a little while later to be hit with cancer and to basically to deal with that in a public way. And as a cancer survivor myself, and I had the luxury of dealing with that privately, to deal with that publicly as a leader when you're still the governor, and then to make it through that, again, exercising leadership throughout the whole process. It's almost as if all these prior experiences in his life led up to being a strong leader for us at this time.
One thing I've watched you on is that situation in Ocean City with the H2O, whatever it's called, H2I, I should know what it is, with the young people coming in with their cars, trying to balance, freedom versus, civic responsibility. I know you've worked so hard on that. That must be just like a real head-banging situation to try to deal with something like that as a leader.
Well, thank you for bringing that up because we were successful even with the early adjournment of this session to pass legislation that would put some prohibitions and enhanced penalties against that type of exhibition driving in Ocean City. The bottom line, it's a public safety issue. And I'm, as you know, very hands-on, and on all those big weekends, when we had the H2I drivers come down, I took my normal walk from my place across Coastal Highway down the boardwalk. And I have to tell you, that weekend that H2I drivers were in town, our town was taken over. It was definitely a public safety issue. It was dangerous, watching this driving, people on the sidewalks, the fact that we had visitors who had stayed up, families who had saved up all year to come to Ocean City to end up being prisoners in their hotel room because they would not risk taking their children out on the streets in Ocean City. That's never happened to us in the history of Ocean City. So we knew we had to take these actions. And I really want to give credit to the mayor of Ocean City and to the whole group that came up, especially Jessica Waters, that she's the communications director for Ocean City, but she spoke as a mother. When she testified in front of the committee, she explained that this isn't the Ocean City that we all know and love. I didn't take my children out that weekend because of the dangers with that driving, that exhibition driving. It was just totally unacceptable and unsafe. And so we were able to pass that legislation at the very end, and it was a heavy lift. And It's a local public safety bill, and I'm glad we were able to move forward with it.
Do you see any ties in that, in terms of, personal freedoms and people who want to go out now who question the restrictions from the pandemic? Are you getting a lot of pressure from people who think it's silly to have to stay inside, that they want to get back on the beach and stuff like that?
Well, I think that we're all looking forward to our outside activities and having the beach and the boardwalk opened and doing so in a safe way. And I expect that's going to happen very soon. But what I'm seeing is people taking responsibility. This is about individual responsibility as much as all these guidelines that will be put in place. And so it's going to be up to each one of us that as we open up, that we do so in a responsible way, and that each one of us do so and lead by example.
I want to give you a chance to throw a bouquet at our first responders, the people in the hospitals. I know at Atlantic General and at Peninsula Regional. I'm so impressed with how they've responded to this. I'm sure you have some insight on that.
Oh, so our first line, and when we think about the first line, it's, our healthcare workers for sure, but it's all the support behind that. It's our law enforcement and public safety and everything behind that. And then it's also those who are, in our grocery stores and providing essential services. So, I just want to thank everybody. It's been a very difficult situation. I hurt when my constituents hurt, and it's very clear that families and businesses have been hard hit by COVID-19. And so, I believe that my role as an elected official and as someone who's been part of this community all my life is to use my role to see how I can help my constituents most impacted by COVID-19. And that is a team effort. So not only thanking all of our frontline workers on COVID-19, but also want to let the families and the businesses know that I am well aware of your pain and that I am completely committed to seeing you, working with you, and seeing you through this process. We need to get back to our shore way of life.
Way off topic here, but I can't resist the opportunity to ask. You have a column in my favorite newspaper this week, the Salisbury Independent, in which you are come out as a proponent for the municipal water access to the Salisbury Airport. Tell us more about your feelings on this.
Well, I was anticipating that question, so I wanted to pull out my Salisbury Airport cap that I'm proud to wear. Just in general, I am so excited about the Salisbury Regional Airport, and I emphasize the word regional because it's the second largest airport in the entire state of Maryland. And we have so many exciting growth projects going on out there. We're going to be expanding the runway. We've got the drone facility. We've got operations at the business park. But we need the water extension project to move forward with all these other projects. So I am a strong supporter of that project. There were some initial concerns and questions raised about annexation, raised by people that I represent, Parsonsburg Fire Department, the residents of Kilburn. So when I heard those questions, I ran them down to make sure that it did not impact annexation. And when you look at the exact language in both agreements, it's very clear that this is a dedicated water service line servicing the airport only. And so at this point, with a $4.4 million commitment from the state of Maryland to move forward with this water extension service project, I want to keep that on track and make sure we don't lose that funding or jeopardize funding for future airport and other Wycomico County projects.
Well, it might just be connectivity where I'm able to deal more directly with people who read the paper, but the suspicions on this have really overwhelmed me, where they don't believe what I have written about this. They don't trust the government, I guess, that when they say it's going to be dedicated, that there won't be an annexation, that annexation doesn't make sense. They just refuse to believe that.
Well, when I started to see some of those comments, that's why I decided to delve into it pretty deeply and talk to those who actually were involved in writing the agreement, read the agreement for myself, make sure I understood the wording of the agreement. And, I'm convinced, and that's why I wanted to share my views on this, that the annexation, there's no annexation in these agreements, that it's limited to the airport only. And it's very clearly written to state that. So, my hope is that with the public forums, with this information being out there, that we can now move forward with this critically important project for the growth of the airport.
Well, Senator Carozza, thanks for letting us come into your house today. It's great to have your leadership at this crucial time. And thank you. You've had a little notice in the paper in recent weeks where you're sending a positive message to people to let them know that you're still there for them. And I'm sure that's very much appreciated.
So I want to thank you, Greg, and Tom and Craig for your public service role in this, because it's important to get good information out on COVID-19. And also for your viewers to understand that non-COVID work is being done as well, such as moving forward with the Salisbury Regional Airport.
She's Senator Mary Beth Carozza. We're thrilled that she let us come into her home today and is helping lead the way through this crisis. And it's just been great to talk to her. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'm
Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper. Another edition of One-on-One right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and One-on-One. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.